After breakfast comes that highly memorable scene. Evidently, Peter and Jesus go off for a walk together. A little distance behind them comes John. And perhaps the other 5 disciples are following John a bit behind. This at least would be one way in which the misunderstanding regarding Christ's words began, mentioned in verses 22 and 23. Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Christ asks 3 times. 3 times Simon answers, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. Feed my lambs, if you love me. Feed my sheep, if you love me. Feed my sheep, if you love me. And then Christ tells Peter that he, Peter, is going to glorify God in his death. And after that word, Jesus says simply, follow me. Then comes our text. As I said, Jesus and Peter, then behind them John, and then possibly behind them, at least this is the way I read it, though this isn't, you can make up your own minds, possibly then the other 5, Thomas, Nathaniel, James, John's brother, and the 2 other unnamed disciples. Peter asks the question, Lord, and what about this man, this John? What's he going to do? Jesus says, if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? Follow me. And then we read that there was a garbled understanding or a misunderstanding of this word that then proceeded to circulate among the brethren. Now, to my mind, this is an unusual but instructive scene, focusing now on our text from verse 20 to verse 23. This unusual scene is the last conversation in John's Gospel, with the misunderstanding in verse 23 appended, because this occasioned a mistaken rumour in the early church. And this strange passage is well worth our understanding this evening. We're taking as our theme those words of Christ in verse 21. Those words of Peter, rather, in verse 21. What shall this man do? What shall this man do? First, we'll note that this is Peter's question. Then, from verse 22, we'll consider Christ's rebuke. And finally, from verse 23, and more briefly, the disciples' misunderstanding. What shall this man do? Peter's question, Christ's rebuke, and the disciples' misunderstanding. So what about Peter's question? What shall this man do? Are we to understand this question in a good sense, out of concern for the brother, or in a bad sense, or maybe a bit of both? Because there undoubtedly is a good sense in which we can ask about and show interest in our brothers and sisters in the church. And indeed, if we do not, in this good sense, ask about and show interest in our brothers and sisters in the church, we sin, because we're to love and care for them. Sinful Cain got a lot wrong, but there was something to that word. Am I my brother's keeper? And there is a sense in which we are our brother's keeper. We must edify one another in love. We should bear one another's burdens. We should provoke one another to good works. We should be given to hospitality. We should seek not our own things, but the things and welfare of others. I didn't give you chapter and verse there, but you should recognize those quotations as straightforward scriptural commands. Our Heidelberg Catechism deals with this, for instance, in its treatment of the communion of saints, where it calls us, each one, readily, that is quickly, without any excuses or hesitation, readily and cheerfully, without any grumbling, readily and cheerfully to employ our gifts for the advantage and salvation of the other members. That's what it is to be a Christian. That's what it is to be a true, functioning member of the church. Love the brethren. And love worketh no ill to his neighbour, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. That's the good sense which we need to hold before us all. The good sense of caring for our brothers and sisters in the church. There is also a wrong and unhealthy interest in one's brother or sister. The Bible refers to this in Proverbs, for instance, as a meddler in somebody else's affairs or a busybody. 1 Peter 4 verse 15, but let none of you, let there not be a single person in the church, suffer as a murderer. I hope we're safe in that one. I imagine we are, at least in the external sense of murderer. Or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or, and this is ranked with murderer, thief, or evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's affairs. That none of you, not one member of the church, no busybodies. One thinks here of the nosy neighbour peeping out of the window. Oh, who is that visiting so-and-so? Nice car they're driving. Oh, you know, I think they were there last week. You know, they stayed quite a while. What's he doing now? What's that they're bringing out of the back seat? That type of nosiness and busybody in somebody else's affairs, which is an unhealthy, idle curiosity. Now, it is certain in this passage that there is some of this bad interest or unhealthy curiosity in Peter's question, Lord, what shall this man do? This is evident especially from Christ's response in the next verse. I'm not going to explain it now because that's the next point, but this point does need to be made here. Jesus says, if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? It's none of your business. None of your business. And then he says, follow thou me. That's your business. Stick to this. None of your old idle curiosity. Leave John alone. Blot out. And this sinful, unhealthy curiosity needs to be guarded against also in true Christian churches, evidently, or else it wouldn't be found in the last conversation in the fourth gospel account. Now, Peter's question to Christ concerning John, what's this man going to do, arose out of circumstances on that day, almost 2,000 years ago, by the Sea of Tiberias. Christ had just told Peter about his, that is, Peter's future work, death, and calling. That's the substance of verses 15 through 19. This is your work. This is how you will die. And this is your calling. And Peter turns around and he sees John. And he's the beloved disciple. These are the things pointed out in verse 20. And he's the one who sat next to Christ at the Last Supper. And he's the one, the only one, who had the courage to ask on that occasion, Lord, which is he that betrayeth thee? So having heard this about himself, Peter thinks, I wonder about him. He's a prominent disciple.